It was a cold, foggy evening in the quiet town of Ravenswood. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the occasional howl of the wind. Detective Arthur Blake sat in his dimly lit office, sipping on a cup of black coffee. Clock on the wall ticked loudly, breaking the silence. Blake was known for solving the most complicated cases, but lately the town had been too peaceful. That was until the phone rang. Blake picked up the receiver. "Blake," he said in his usual gruff tone. "Detective, you need to come to the old library. There's been a murder," a shaky voice on the other end said. Blake grabbed his coat and hat and rushed out the door. The old library was a crumbling building on the edge of town, abandoned for years. Who would be there? And why? When Blake arrived, he was met by Officer Jenkins, a young and nervous policeman. "Detective, it's strange. You need to see this." Inside the library, the air was thick with dust. The shelves were lined with ancient books, and the floor was covered in cobwebs. In the center of the room lay a man in his late 30s, dressed in a suit. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide open, as if he had seen something terrifying before he died. But what caught Blake's attention was the note clutched in the man's hand. It read, 1-10-1-11. "Binary code," Blake muttered. He had seen enough puzzles in his career to recognize it. "What does it mean?" Jenkins asked. "I don't know yet," Blake replied, "but we need to find out." The victim was identified as Victor Hargrove, a computer programmer who had recently moved to Ravenswood. He had no enemies, no criminal record, and no reason to be in the old library. Blake decided to visit Victor's apartment. It was a small, tidy place filled with books on coding and mathematics. On his desk, Blake found a notebook filled with more binary code. It seemed Victor had been working on something secret. As Blake flipped through the pages, he noticed a pattern. The binary sequences were getting more complex, as if Victor had been trying to solve a puzzle. "What were you working on, Victor?" Blake wondered aloud. Just then, Jenkins called. "Detective, we found another body." The second victim was a woman named Clara Mills, a mathematician who had worked with Victor on a project years ago. She was found in her home, lying on the floor with a similar note in her hand, 11-1-10-0. Blake's mind raced. Two victims, both connected to numbers and codes. Was this the work of a serial killer? And why leave binary notes? He decided to consult an old friend, Professor Harold Green, a retired mathematician. "Harold, I need your help," Blake said, showing him the binary notes. The professor adjusted his glasses and studied the numbers. Let's see. If we convert these binary sequences to decimal, we get 5, 6, 3, and 12. What do those numbers mean?" Blake asked. "They could be coordinates, or perhaps a code for something else," Harold replied. "But there's more. If you look at the sequences together, they form a pattern. It's almost like a countdown." "A countdown to what?" Blake asked, his heart racing. "I don't know," Harold said. "But you need to figure it out before it's too late." Blake returned to his office and spread out all the evidence. The binary notes, Victor's notebook, and Clara's research papers. He spent hours poring over the details, trying to find a connection. Then it hit him. The numbers 5, 6, 3, and 12 corresponded to letters in the alphabet E, F, C, and L. But what did EFCL mean? Blake's eyes widened. It's not FCL, it's FCL. Rearranged, it spells FELC. But that doesn't make sense. Wait, what if it's FLAC? Still nothing. Unless. He grabbed Victor's notebook and flipped to the last page. There, scribbled in the corner, was a single word, FLAC. FLEC. FLAC. What does it mean? Blake muttered. Then it clicked. FLAC was short for Fleming, the name of a powerful tech company that Victor and Clara had worked for years ago. The company had been involved in a scandal, accused of stealing intellectual property. Victor and Clara had testified against them, but the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. Was this revenge? Blake rushed to the Fleming headquarters, a towering glass building in the heart of the city. He demanded to speak to the CEO, Richard Fleming. Detective Blake, what brings you here? Fleming asked, his voice smooth but cold. I think you know, Blake replied, showing him the binary notes. Fleming's face remained calm, but his eyes flickered with something fear. Anger? I don't know what you're talking about, Fleming said. Victor Hargrove and Clara Mills are dead, Blake said. And I think you're behind it. Fleming leaned back in his chair. You have no proof. Maybe not yet, Blake said, but I will find it. As Blake left the building, he received another call. It was Jenkins. Detective, we found another note. This one was sent to your office. Blake rushed back to his office and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a binary sequence, 0, 1, 10, 11. Blake quickly decoded it, 0, 1, 2, 3. A countdown, he whispered. But to what? Then he realized. The numbers weren't just a countdown, they were a warning. The next target was him. The story ends with Blake racing against time to solve the final piece of the puzzle before the killer strikes again. Who is behind the binary code? What is their endgame? And can Blake stop them before it's too late? The mystery deepens, and the clock is ticking.